Good evening. I'm Karen Taylor. I'm a program director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, and I'm so pleased to be able to welcome you here this evening to tonight's lecture, which is part of the 2021 Labour, Literature and Landmark Lectures. We very much appreciate your support and are so pleased that you can join us this evening. For those of you who may be less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. We were founded in 1785 by 22 artisans. We are a non-profit organization, and today our 236-year-old organization continues to serve and improve the quality of life of the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, which celebrated 200 years very recently, our John M. Mossman Lock Museum, and our lecture series, which is also nearly 200 years old. And of course, tonight's lecture is part of that. Before introducing our speakers, I just wanted to mention that after the presentation this evening, we will have a short Q&A of 10 or 15 minutes. And please feel free to submit any type questions that you may have at any point during the lecture. And of course, at the lecture's conclusion in the Q&A section. We will try to get to as many as possible, and we will ask you to use the Q&A option rather than putting your hand up. In the fall, we were so fortunate to have Tim Fryatt of Marvel speaking about a project that he'd been working on, the restoration of the Battery Maritime building. I noticed at that time on the Marvel website that another project Marvel had undertaken was the adaptive reuse of the historic tobacco warehouse into St. Anne's Warehouse. On my visit to the theatre there, I've been so impressed by the stunning design of the new building and how it was integrated with the historic building. It really is an outstanding fusion of the past and present. We approached the Marvel design team who worked on this project and who included Lissa So and Zachary Griffin, who very generously agreed to share their experiences working on this project. Lissa So is a founding partner of Marvel with over 20 years of experience. Lissa honed her expertise in theatre design, renovating St. Anne's Warehouse, a project that brought multiple awards to the Marvel office. She also led the design team for Theatre Squared, a new regional theatre in Fayetteville, Arkansas. She also completed the Lyric Theatre, the Broadway home of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. In addition, Lissa is currently spearheading One Clinton, a 36-story residential tower that will house the new Brooklyn Public Library. That's the Brooklyn Heights Library. And the new Northeast Bronx YMCA. I should also mention that both these projects are likely to be completed this summer. Lissa attended Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute where she studied architecture. Zachary Griffin is an associate at Marvel. Notable projects he has worked on include Theatre Squared, Fayetteville, Arkansas, St. Anne's Warehouse as the associate project architect, Playwrights Horizon, Roosevelt Tower, Queens, and the Harvard Club. It's now my huge pleasure to introduce to both of you Lissa So and Zachary Griffin. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Lissa and Zachary, over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. We really appreciate you asking us to be here tonight and share our experiences. St. Anne's Warehouse is a project that is near and dear to our hearts. It's just this really wonderful experience that Zach and I had over the course of a number of years. And we're really excited to be here today to share that with you and really tell you kind of the history of the tobacco warehouse, the history of the project, and really what it took to get the project done. And so I'll jump right in and share my screen. And This is a view of the building, how it sits today. But the tobacco warehouse, it sits right at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge, and along the waterfront, really nestled within Brooklyn Bridge Park. And it's a building that has a great history. So we thought we'd kind of walk you through that history and tell you a little bit about how the building has transformed over the years. So it was first built in 1868. It was built for the Fulton stores, originally as a tobacco inspection warehouse, and was 5 stories when it was first built. Somewhere along the way, really around 1946, the building was taken, 3 stories were taken off the top of the building, and really it was a 2-story structure for a number of years. But it originally had a rectangular shape to it, almost a square shape, slightly off a square. And it was really built as part of kind of this whole complex where Empire Store sits today, adjacent to it. And then, as we all know, in 1870, the Brooklyn Bridge started to be built, and it was built over the course of a number of years, really 13 years. And you can see the tobacco warehouse sitting kind of really at the foot of that. In 1901, it changed from the Fulton stores. The Arbuckle brothers purchased the property, and it was transformed from a tobacco inspection into really a coffee warehouse. It held coffee as a warehouse, but you can kind of see the building itself had that kind of the brick shell. It had a heavy timber structure within it. And there were never any, it wasn't really an enclosed building. It had shutters that kind of closed it off, but it was really kind of an open air building. In 1915, they came in and they built Dock Street, which really ran along adjacent to the Brooklyn Bridge. And at that time, they really chopped off a triangle of that building. And so what used to be, really 2 rectangles, there's a party wall that sits right here, became a rectangle and a triangle. And then we just wanted to show you what that looked like in 1925. It's still a 5-story building, but again, with that kind of angled wall creating that triangle. And then again, in 1946, the building was taken down from the 5 stories down to the 2 stories. And it wasn't until 1974 that really the Fulton Ferry Historic District became part of the Nestor Registry. And then in 1978, the building was acquired by the New York Office of Parks and Recreation and really began to deteriorate over the years. The wood structure began to fall apart. The brick was really in disrepair. And then in the late 1990s, there was lightning struck the building. And so there was a fire in the building. And so that was the point where they really took the wood structure out. And at some point it was in such disrepair that they almost tore the building down. But preservationists really fought to save the building. And then in the early 2000s, Robert Silman's office was hired to stabilize the structure and really kind of bring it back to life. And so over the course of a little over a decade, that's how the building sat as really this historic relic, really a shell that was part of the park that was open to the public. You could really go in and walk through it. On Saturdays, the smorgasbord was filled the structure, and so it really became this kind of community asset. And they held weddings there, and even St. Anne's had some performances within the tobacco warehouse. So another big piece of the project is really St. Anne's history itself, and it played a really big role in our design and how we thought about the building and how it should be kind of planned and laid out. But St. Anne's Warehouse really started its roots in the St. Anne's Church in Brooklyn Heights. Susan Feldman was hired, or really started a nonprofit to develop performing arts programming. And then she convinced the Willentis family to allow her to use a warehouse that was down in Dumbo, 38 Water Street. And it was really there that St. Anne's warehouse was developed. And so they were there for a number of years. You can see the tobacco warehouse is just diagonally across the street. And then that building was taken down for a new development, so for a temporary period of time. And while we were designing and building the tobacco warehouse, they were located in 29 J Street for about 3 years. But this is the building that they were in for, well over a decade, and really became kind of the DNA of St. Anne's Warehouse. Again, really, really close proximity to where their home is now. But the warehouse itself really lended to establishing what became their reputation of having flexible performance. So every time you went into St. Anne's, you would experience something totally different. The place would be reconfigured in a completely different way than it was the last time you were there. And so that was really important to our design, that we'd be able to provide a space that could provide that flexibility. And so you can see some of the different performances that happened in that 38 Water Street space. They had Brooklyn Designs, the furniture design show there. They had, a number of different configurations, including really more of an immersive performance. And Black Watch was a show that we really wanted to make sure that we could accommodate a traverse, something really long. That was something we kept going back to. Well, can it fit Black Watch? So we're going to just kind of step you through a little bit of the design process, and then Zach's going to talk a little bit more about some of the details of the project. But the project really started when Brooklyn Bridge Park released an RFP back in 2010. St. Anne's Warehouse entered that RFP, and they actually did it with Hugh Hardy and H3, did the initial design, and this was what was submitted with that initial RFP. And then St. Anne's won, and it was, but there was a couple lawsuits that stopped that process and really stalled it for about a year. And during that time, we began talking to Susan, and we're really happy to be brought on board and to design and work on the project. And it was really very much a collaborative effort with Charcoal Blue, Burl Happel and Silman, and really with Susan Feldman really leading the effort and really dictating where we were going with the design. So this is just an image of a workshop that we had, one of the initial kind of planning workshops. So we were trying to figure out how we were going to lay out the building. And these are some models from that. And it was really, how could we fit the main theater space and then also the studio theater, which would also become a community space where anyone in the community could come and rent that space and do that through through Brooklyn Bridge Park. And what we came to very quickly was the idea of creating this volume that would house all of the program other than the main theater. So the dressing rooms, the restrooms, the St. Anne's office, mechanical, and even that community room would sit within what we ultimately started to call the bunker. And that would sit really between a rectangle and the triangle. And that would allow us to leave the triangle open and start to begin to create a warehouse and theater space for St. Anne's. And so inside that, we would insert a steel structure that would hang a catwalk, and that catwalk would run throughout that entire space and really allow for ultimate flexibility for performance. And really ultimately creating that new warehouse for Susan and leaving the triangle open to the public and really part of the park. Another important thing was thinking about how we wanted to enter the building, like what was going to be the front door. And really the design embraced the idea of allowing the building to be very porous and allow you to come into the building in different ways. And depending on how they set up the show, maybe they would direct people towards one door or the other. But we did want to have a connection directly from the triangle and into the main space. We wanted the waterfront to feel very welcoming and open, but also many people come down Dock Street. So it made a lot of sense to kind of come in and have an access down Dock Street. And then another important thing was that the community really wanted to be able to they had that visible connection through in when the building really sat as a shell. And they wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity when you're walking down Water Street to see all the way through the structure and to the waterfront. And really with this configuration, we began to test, how could we fit a large concert with 800 people? What was the kind of standard configuration with 330 people, standard end stage, and then more of a linear configuration like that Black Watch performance. And this is just a section showing how the building started to lay out, where we would have all of the program within that bunker space, and then the main theater is that main volume, and then the catwalk really taking up as little space as we could, and then mechanical and structure on top of that. And so what that really led us to was that the existing brick wall, we had about 7.5 feet that we needed to rise above that. And we started to look at kind of the proportion of that and what that would become. And so these are some very early massing studies from, you can see it says October 17th, 2012, where we were really looking at how much that wall was sitting above the existing brick wall. But just a few days after that October 17th presentation, Superstorm Sandy hit. And so this is an image, the tobacco warehouse is sitting right there, and a tremendous amount of water came into our beautiful structure, and really, made us kind of think about the project in a little bit of a different way. So you can see that this is an image of the building just after Sandy. That's the water line of where the water was inside the building. So Zach's going to talk a little bit through some of the decisions that we made as we work through that.
Thanks, Lissa. Yeah, so as you can see, we without changing the overall design concepts, it was very much a rethinking of how we are thinking about the building in terms of resiliency. So here we can see that Lissa had mentioned that St. Anne's Warehouse needs a certain playing height for the types of performances they put on. And that's about 20 feet. So that's the space that we are providing below the catwalk area. After Sandy, as many of you are aware, there's new design flood elevations that we were having to contend with. And I think not wanting to raise the building height up more than we had to, paying respect to the height that St. Anne's needed for their performances, we realized we had an issue that we needed to take a look at. So we started thinking of ways that we could either design to the design flood elevation or propose a different way of doing it. And we explored a lot of different ways of trying to comply with it. And none of them really worked. Floodgates and dry flood proofing would be a challenge because the weak point would become your masonry walls where water would end up seeping in anyway. So we ended up proposing to build the ground floor below the design flood elevation and going through BSA to do so. And to do that, we proposed a series of resiliency measures. The major one was locating all of the mechanical and theatrical systems above the ground floor. So the only thing happening at the ground floor would be incoming services and routing everything up to equipment that would be located on upper levels and then feeding down. Ideally, in a performance space, originally we had been thinking about providing conditioned air from below because of acoustics. And I think, Sandy obviously made us think that that was probably a bad idea. We also looked at different construction methods. So on the ground floor, we used masonry walls for the lowest portion of the partitions. And that way we could allow water in future events. And the only thing that would be sacrificed would be the wall finishes themselves. You can see that construction here on the bottom right. It also informed our decisions on interior finishes and choosing things that weren't precious, but also played into the aesthetics of St. Anne's, but could easily be replaced if a future event were to occur. We were still dealing with the issue that Lissa mentioned earlier of how to accommodate that change in elevation above the existing height of the walls and the clerestory height that we needed to accommodate the catwalks. So we explored many options. This, I would say, is a select handful of many more that aren't on the screen right now. So we were trying to find the right material that would both complement the existing masonry, but also demarcate the new construction versus the old construction. So we looked at a lot of glazing options, a lot of more solid opaque options, but it was difficult to find something that really blended the two and had them be complementary. The bottom left image was trying to use a metal screen that was using the same geometry as the brick ties of the existing walls. That was a leading contender for a little while. We finally came along to a glass product, a glass brick product, and that really ended up being the favorite. It was an organic texture that spoke to the existing brick, but it was also a clear way of noting the existing versus the new in a way that lets you experience and see the existing walls as you would normally. You can see that the glass brick reflects some of the sky, and so that the new construction is clear in what it is, but it lets you see the existing masonry walls for what they are. So this is a view from Old Dock Street looking down, and you can see that glass brick clerestory slightly inset from the existing masonry walls. So we developed this detail for the glass brick with Pittsburgh Corning, who makes this product, and it ended up being a kind of perfect fit for the building because it's a solid glass brick. It's not like a hollow glass block, and in that way, it's very good for acoustics, which is great for the theater. It also allows daylighting into the space. So in a theater atmosphere, that's a rare commodity for the folks who are working in the theater on a daily basis. This is the glass brick detail. Interestingly, our entire new building sits within the existing brick walls, but does not bear on them. And talking to Silman, who knows this building intimately, they made us aware that the existing brick walls are sustaining themselves, but they wouldn't be able to bear any additional weight of the new building. So essentially, we built a new steel structure within the shell of the existing brick masonry. The glass brick is cantilevered off of that steel structure and hovers over the brick wall. And really the only seal that's made between those two is an acoustic expansion joint product that makes the seal between the new and the old. On the triangle side, we had a similar condition. The demising wall between the two portions of the older building is somewhat lower. And here we devised a similar thing where, again, it's not resting on the masonry walls, it's hovering over that. And we created an acoustic wall that's shielding the mechanical equipment behind it in this case. The glass brick details were a unique detail, and it was something new that Pittsburgh Corning had not really done before in a prior project. So we worked with them to develop unique custom details. I think in the past, this product was used on transit, correctional facilities, and educational projects. And typically it was done in a stacked bond configuration. So we had to work with them to develop how we could use it in a running bond that would be more like you would see in a masonry brick. So with that material selection made, these are a series of design renderings once we had solidified our material palette. Another thing to note is the exterior doors and the exterior windows. We had designed those carefully to match the historic shutters that were once within those openings. So the strapping on the doors, the astragal detail was meant to be a replication in dimension and color to those previous shutters. This is an evening image where you can see through the upper windows to the catwalks inside. And this is an image from the park where we can see the triangle garden as still open to air. On the inside, we also wanted to develop a material palette that was both reverential to the existing brick masonry walls, but also evocative of the spirit of St. Anne's Warehouse. And so we worked a lot with our mechanical engineer, Burrow Happold, to develop details that allowed us to condition the space without furring off of the interior of the existing walls or insulating them. And that way we could leave the existing masonry walls exposed as one of the exterior finishes. And so what's not shown in this rendering is along the perimeter wall, we have a fin tube radiant system that conditions that wall in just an efficient enough way to let us not have insulation and furring off of the brick on the inside. The rest of the interior material palette really consists of two additional materials, which is blackened steel and plywood cladding. So these are both designed to be resilient and replaceable, but also durable for use in a flexible theater setting. So this is the bunker that was clad in the plywood. This is the community space and studio theater. So two sides are the existing brick, and you have framed views of the park and the Manhattan Bridge beyond. You know, another part of the interior aesthetic was very much to leave the new steel structure raw, not paint it. We were not obliged to fireproof the steel, which we were happy about. But we also made intentional decisions not to take off the chalk marks from the steel fabrication. And you know, in that way, it was relating the new structure to the existing. The existing brick has instances where there's paint marks left from its use as a warehouse. And we thought that treating the steel as a raw material was a way of speaking to that. This is that view quarter that Lissa mentioned. So in this rendering, we would be looking from Water Street through to Brooklyn Bridge Park. And you have that clear view through. Another element in laying out the space was to take advantage and not lose some of those kind of magical moments that were in the shell of the existing walls. This window framed the top of the Brooklyn Bridge almost perfectly. And so we are able to, you know, lay out the space such that this area became a double height vestibule entry from the garden itself. So this is one of the main entries into the space. And when you're leaving into the triangle garden, you get this nice framed view of the bridge. We also worked very closely with Michael Van Valkenburg's office to design the triangle garden. MVVA also designed Brooklyn Bridge Park, and so it was a perfect fit to have them come in and do the triangle garden. And I think it ended up in a seamless connection between the greater park itself and the triangle garden. But at the same time, the triangle garden is this nice quiet respite within the park, and it's its own unique moment. So this is a nice instance where this is open to the public. It's part of the park, but St. Anne's, it's very much also part of St. Anne's entrance. So with the design in hand, we moved into construction. We thought, because this is an existing masonry shell only that are, you know, it's adaptive reuse, but we're talking about exterior walls only that are existing conditions issues might be minimized on this project, but they ended up not being. So immediately upon starting construction, some of the things that Lissa and I had been apprehensive about came to fruition. So during design, we were working from two-dimensional surveys in plan and elevation of the existing walls. And we had hesitation with that because we knew that those walls were not braced at the top for many, many years. And so there's a lot of bowing and bending happening within the walls that we were afraid wasn't being captured in two-dimensional surveys. And when construction started and the steel erector came on to do their surveys, they were noticing that, yes, in fact, some of the column locations with our new steel column grid were hitting instances where the masonry walls were bending quite radically inward and outward as the wall moved up vertically. So luckily, our CM commissioned a three-dimensional point cloud survey immediately after making that realization. And we had a very detailed three-dimensional survey at that point of every part of the wall. So with that in hand, we were able to slightly readjust our structural grid and recommence with construction. So here you can see the steel structure being erected, and within inside, the slab has already been poured, the new slab. In this picture, we can see the steel still going up, but you get a sense of how the clerestory is coming together here. And you can see how the beginning of the permanent portion of the seating rake being formed right here. One of the biggest milestones we had during construction was when they finally installed the glass brick. So remarkably, I think one of the interesting things is that this glass brick is really installed in exactly the same way as you would with masonry brick. Here you can see that. So this is with the glass brick fully installed, and we can see some of that raw steel with the markings that we kept as a finished condition. This image is with more of the catwalk done, and you really get a sense of that field of catwalk creating the plane of the ceiling within the space, but also how it allows for any type of configuration to happen below because you have so many fixing points. You can also see these silver elements are mechanical ducts, and that's from locating the equipment above and then feeding air down through the space. And with that, I'll hand it back to Lissa, who will talk a little bit about some completion images of the project.
Great, thanks, Zach. Yeah, I mean, we wanted to just kind of take you on a tour a little bit of the finished space and try and point out some things as we go. This is an image as you're standing on the rake, looking all the way back to the wall at Water Street. And really you can really get a sense of the kind of complexity of the grid and weaving of all of the mechanical and the electrical. It's this really kind of intense, really system that allows St. Anne's to have this truly flexible space. This is kind of looking back at the rake, and we worked very closely with Charcoal Blue to design the seats themselves, and actually half of this rake is removable, so then basically the floor can extend and allows for greater configuration. I think also really to point out as we go through these images, you can see like we really embraced the kind of variation in the textures of the walls. Like we really just only wanted to do what was necessary to stabilize and make sure that these walls were going to last, for a long time. So just repointing of brick, but not trying to make it, any different than it felt, when we started the design of the space. This is a view of kind of that main lobby space, looking out to the park. Really a lot of openings, a lot of windows along that park. And I love this space because you can really see the brick wall, the plywood, and the blackened steel, and all of these materials kind of working together, the concrete floor and the concrete bar. It's really, this space really captures all of those materials in one place. Then this is kind of when you're walking back towards the theater and getting closer to the entry vestibule. And this leads to this space which Zach was talking about before, with this really wonderful double height space. We wanted to maintain this view looking out to the Brooklyn Bridge. And this is a space that people would come and take their wedding pictures, and we really wanted to be able to maintain that. Another thing to really notice in this picture is that we had to work really closely with the contractor. Your Construction built the space, and took great care in the construction, but we had to work with their electrical subcontractor and we actually drew the conduit. Zach himself did many sketches of every brick wall to say okay, have this come out and go down, and everything that you're seeing was very carefully coordinated and crafted. I think it's also worth mentioning in this view is the light fixture was designed by David Weeks, who's a local designer that designed and built that fixture. And then he also did the fixtures that are in the bathrooms, which are really fun. And the bathrooms are something that we talk about a lot on this project. The original intention was for there to be really gender neutral bathrooms, that there would be one main space that was shared sinks, and then we'd had individual stalls. You know, I think for every female on this call, they're used to standing in a long line during intermission, and we wanted to kind of equalize that across genders. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do it because at the time when we filed the project, the New York City Plumbing Code and the New York City Department of Buildings was really not accepting of that idea, that there would be shared fixtures, particularly the sinks as shared fixtures. So that really led us to the idea of when you enter into the women's room or the men's room's bathroom, you actually come into the same space. There's kind of a vestibule, if you will, where you actually do have some shared sinks. And then you go into the section for the men and the section for the women. This is I think, a really beautiful image. This is in the main theater space. You know, you get this really wonderful light coming through that glass brick. There are blinds that actually close that off and really black out all the light. But what's so unique about this theater is that having that natural light for people that are loading in the show, setting up the set, it's such a unique thing for them to have that natural light and be able to like really work in a space like this. Another thing to point out in this image is within this plywood wall, we built a lot of storage and really so that they could store all their tools and really hide everything away. So if there was a performance in this section, you really wouldn't be able to tell that all of that was there. And then coming up on the catwalk, that's actually Zach standing there on the catwalk. You know, you can kind of see all the technical components of the catwalk and how much this is serving the space. So we wanted to just show you a few shows that have happened in the space. This was actually the first performance. They had Henry IV, which was an all-female cast, and it was this wonderful kind of in the round performance where they put a cage around the space, and you actually had to enter into the cage. So Zach and I had the real benefit of going to the opening performance, which was such a treat. And then this was also in their first season. This was a show called Nice Fish, where it was a regular end stage configuration where, you know, 330 occupants, but really they pushed the stage and had this really effect, a perspective effect that allowed for this amazing set design. And then this is Oklahoma, which really was very similar to that Black Watch configuration that I showed at the very beginning. And Oklahoma was just this really wonderful success that went on to Broadway and you know, had great success on Broadway as well. But they created a plywood box within the theater that you entered in and had very long seating but not very deep. So it really felt like you were part of the performance. And then even more extreme is the jungle, also just critically acclaimed. And at the jungle, they totally reconfigured the space. They created this kind of tent where the main performance was, but then they also put up a dome, which became like a lounge bar, you know, which you occupied before the performance. And then the spaces also really allowed them to have their galas there. They also kind of rented out for things like fashion shows. And even in the time that we're in right now, they've been able to rent the space out as a soundstage when they weren't able to really put performances on. The St. Anne's Warehouse sign that you see here, this was a really wonderful collaboration with Tom Fruin, who's a local designer. He's really known for his glass water tanks that you see around Dumbo and really around the world at this point. But we collaborated with him and the graphic designer, Anita Merck, who's been doing St. Anne's graphic design for many, many years. And between the two of them, we really designed the signage, this large St. Anne's Warehouse sign, as well as the theater sign that sits at the corner of the building on Water Street. And this picture was taken right after the building was complete, and so the landscape hadn't really grown in. But since then, you know, the trees have really grown up, and filled that space. And it's become this really wonderful, integrated and really integrated with the park. Feels very public, but at the same time, it feels like this kind of private secret garden that that anyone can really occupy. So it's really just become this wonderful space as part of the park. And then to kind of finish, you know, we would just say that, you know, the building itself has you know, really gone through this transition and become this wonderful, really world-class theater that sits in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And you know, we're very, very proud of the work that we did here and you know, the way that this project has turned out. So we're looking forward to your questions, and you know, we hope we can answer all your questions. So thank you so much.
Lisa and Zach, I want to thank you so much. In fact, I'm sorry, Lissa. I am so sorry, Lisa. I've been realized I've been mispronouncing your name all this time. So that was absolutely fabulous. I mean, could there be any other building, any other theater in New York City that has such a spectacular backdrop, including both the Tobacco Warehouse and Brooklyn Bridge? So, and it was a really wonderful, eloquent presentation. Now, I'm going to say more at the end, but unless Victoria wants to say something, then we'll start the questions. Victoria, would you like to say anything?
It was just, it was Alyssa was, and Zach, wonderful, but it makes me miss in-person programming.
I know.
More. Oh my goodness, just looking at those images, and I'm just so glad that you're starting, you're starting, you know, launching people coming back into this space, and it's an exquisite space, and I can't wait to visit and photograph, from not only see a performance, but take photos from some of those vantage points, because it's very beautiful. So thank you for your exquisite work. And
thank you so much.
You have such a beautiful passion for your work. Thank you.
Great. Well, then we will start taking some questions. Oh, and one thing I do want to mention, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, Zach and Lissa have been involved in many cultural and theatre projects. And I just want to mention that one of the projects that they've just started working on, and I hope this is okay for me to mention this, is the National Black Theatre. They are working on a new theatre for that. So that's also a really incredibly exciting project. So I just wanted to mention that. So the questions. Dominic Agostino wanted, do you know why the tobacco building was reduced from 5 to 2 stories?
Yeah, I mean, we think we do. We're not 100% sure.
We've been told something.
Yeah, I mean, we think because of new building codes and really the need for fire protection within your building, we think that's the reason that they reduced it, right? They were gonna need to invest too much money to really bring the building up to the current codes, and therefore brought it down to 2 stories. Zach, I don't know if you.
That was the same answer I was going to give. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So code played a part even in those days. Okay, that's. And
we think that's why. We were really never able to 100% clarify that, but that's the story that we stick to.
Okay, well that sounds good to me. This is also from Dominic. What is the significance of the X's along the perimeter wall? Were they strictly decorative? Did they have any other purpose?
Those are masonry ties, and so there used to be rods that would connect through, and it was really to brace the existing masonry walls and connect them to the timber framing of the floors on the interior. So they ended up becoming decorative when the interior floor and framing was removed. The rods that those were connecting on either end were removed as well, but they did once serve a purpose.
Right.
And as Zach mentioned when he was showing the kind of the options that we went through, one of the design ideas was to basically recreate those ties and create a screen with them. And that screen would become, you know, that's the 7-foot addition. And luckily we went towards the direction of the glass brick because I think it was a much better solution. But I did have a fondness for that idea of creating that screen with the ties.
That sounded a fantastic idea. And I have to say, those glass bricks are absolutely wonderful. Who wouldn't want glass bricks? Really, they're fabulous. David Wagner, he asked about the curtains that cover the glass bricks. I guess he wants to know more about them, how they work during performance.
So they're motorized blackout shades. And I think those actually came into being during construction. For a long time, because of budget concerns, we were thinking of different ways to black out the theater in front of the clerestory. So we had plywood panels at one point with gasket systems, but we're really happy that St. Anne's Warehouse, they elected to make this decision to do blackout shades and fundraised to make that achievable. But now it's very much, it can be part of the performance. Actually, it's motorized and it's part of the controls. So when they make the bell sound for the beginning of a show, those curtains will automatically lower.
Yeah, and it's, I think we hadn't made the decision to go forward with the shades until I think everybody really experienced what it felt like to have that fully open and how amazing it would be to easily transition from it being open to closed. And, the idea of trying to remove these plywood panels, it was either they were going to be open or closed. But really to make it part of the performance was, it was worth every penny.
It absolutely was. Now, Dominic Agostino seemed to got in quite a few questions early on. So this will be the last question, Dominic, just to be fair to other people, but I will ask this one. He wants to know, can you speak a little bit more about the building being in a flood zone and what additional work took place?
Zach, you want to take that one?
Sure. So we didn't necessarily need to do additional work. It was more rethinking our resiliency approach. And so, again, I think at one point we were thinking of providing conditioned air from below. We decided after Sandy that would have been the wrong approach. And then we were also deciding after Sandy and realizing that we had a new design flood elevation to contend with, whether we should try to elevate our ground floor or not. So we explored a couple different options for that, but some of the issues with doing that is, as you know, the existing arches are not going to change, right? And for loading in large set pieces and things like that, St. Anne's did not want to limit the height they had to get things into the building. There was also an issue of raising the slab and having to have exterior stairs that would go into the public right of way, and that would be an issue. And I think we mentioned that dry flood proofing, we looked at that as well, and that was proving to be problematic and costly. And so that's how we ended up with getting a variance to build below the design flood elevation, and doing that in hopefully a responsible way by having different resiliency approaches in mind, so that St. Anne's would be able to effectively recover more easily from a future event.
Right, thank you. Thank you for so comprehensively answering that. And Tierney comments that this was a fabulous presentation. Dennis Lieberson has two questions. Oh, well, one of them you've already answered. Why was the building reduced from 5 stories? So I think we have already covered that. Now, what was the role of charcoal blue?
Charcoal blue was they were actually on the project before we were. They were part of the initial RFP. And they're an award-winning, amazing theater designer. For all of the architects out there listening to this right now, if you have a theater project, you should call them because they're incredible. So they were very much our partner. Like they and really have been our partner on all the theater projects that we've worked on. And so we work hand in hand with them to kind of not just work through technical requirements of what needs to happen in the theater, but also just how's the space going to feel? How is this going to help promote a performance? And they just know theater. And so I think, having them as a partner really made the project so much more successful. So yeah, I mean, Zach, I don't know if you have anything.
No, I think that's
that,
exactly right. I think, they were the acoustician, the theater consultant, stage lighting, audio visual. But I think to Lissa's point, they come at theater consultancy from a more British standpoint than an American standpoint. And so they get involved in the theater planning. And so, they would question us about, is the location of the box office right for the flow of people coming in and progressing into their seats for a show? So I think they were very much a partner and much more involved than I think we were used to in a very good way.
Yeah, I mean, even the design of the catwalk itself, they really kind of set the configuration of that. And then we work together, kind of figure out the structure and the detail of it. But really the shape of it really came from them.
Right. Well, as you say, they do sound like a wonderful group to have on a project with regards to theaters. This is from Vivian Top, and she asked if you could talk a bit more about the acoustics and the original window installation.
That's a very good question. Acoustics was like number 1 priority. I mean, we're sitting directly under the Brooklyn Bridge, so you get all of the bridge traffic, right? And then we're sitting right up against Water Street, so you get the bus traffic, and then you also get the helicopters flying over. The news helicopters that are looking at the traffic, right? So it was an extremely difficult site for acoustics to put a theater right here. So I mean, it was something that we just took great care and again, collaborated very closely with Charcoal Blue about making decisions. But the major moves were, we put a concrete slab as the roof, continuous concrete slab with no penetrations. We have no drains coming through the main roof space. Everything drains off into the bunker space and then down through the bunker. As Zach mentioned, the glass brick itself has very good acoustic properties. And so it actually works, like a masonry wall without any openings in it. So that was, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the exterior doors and windows too. I think some of the fun part in this project with acoustics is that you don't notice it. And the exterior doors and windows, they are triple glazed, large air pocket in between an IGU and a third glazing light. So they're very much custom with the arched top, but they were also designed to match and be very low profile, to be reverential to the tobacco warehouse and the old opening. So it's not immediately apparent that those doors and windows are highly acoustic.
I have to say the doors were one of the hardest things on this job. I lost some sleep over those doors. Just making sure that not just that they were going to acoustically perform, but that they were going to kind of perform on a daily basis, because they were these really heavy, large doors, yeah. And also that they were going to fit within the openings.
But it all worked out.
It did.
Obviously worked out very, 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 very well. Okay, so this is Dennis Lieberson's second question, and you have really partly answered this. Why would you use glass bricks in a theater space besides the lobby space? Well, acoustics. So I'll let you. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, as Zach said in his presentation, that really wanting to have a material that was kind of a modern reference to the historic brick. It had a similar proportion. It was, it's masonry, like having a really direct relationship. And then we had it continuous and all the way around, because it was very important that that entire space felt like the warehouse, right? That it wasn't just the theater or the lobby. The whole thing can be performance. And so it was important to us that it was continuous. I mean, prior to our project, this product had only been used kind of framed. Like you would only get kind of 10 foot long, and then you'd get it framed. It was important to us that it was continuous and we didn't have any breaks. So that was another big challenge of the project, figuring out how we could not frame it, really make it continuous and wrap totally around the building.
And it does seem a little bit counterintuitive to use, something translucent or transparent in a performance space. But one of the things that St. Anne's Warehouse was really interested in as well was creating this beacon in Dumbo that really, called out to what it was. And so I think the other thing that the glass brick let us do, there's interior lighting that's behind it that you can see in some of those images, and it glows at night, right? And so I think it's this placemaking opportunity that they saw as well.
And that works very effectively. This is from Anne Tierney, and she'd like you to, if you wouldn't mind, to talk about how you dealt with setbacks, especially after your work was underway. She's referencing in particular Hurricane Sandy, the buckling walls. And she adds, you spoke of it so calmly in this presentation. Was that how you reacted at the time?
I think with this project, even from the get-go, we said this is going to be very hard. This is going to be all consuming, and we just said, we need to be all in. And so I think we lived and breathed this project for the time that we were on it. So things like that did not seem calm in the moment, but I think, we just knew we had to plow ahead.
Yeah, and I would add, I think we all felt a great responsibility to a number of things. Like, we needed to not screw up this really beautiful historic structure. We could have totally ruined it. And we kind of held that fear in us, we have to do a beautiful building. This has to be successful. And then also we just felt a really enormous responsibility to Susan Feldman and St. Anne's Warehouse, and that we had to create a building that was going to be their home for just many, many years to come. So I think everyone on the team took that very seriously, and just felt like we had to do everything that we could. So when things happened, like Zach said, we just had to figure out a solution and plow through. And I was just going to say, I would add York Construction to that too. They also felt just extremely responsible in delivering just a top of the line building for St. Anne's.
That's what I was going to say. And I think what helped those tough situations was having everyone on the team being a team. And so unlike some other projects that people might have worked on, when an issue arose, it was very much approached as this is our collective problem, and how can we all solve it? So.
Right, thank you. This is a comment from Carl Anderson. He's saying how great the presentation is, and he comments, I used to walk past the structure in the 90s looking for the doors and cracks and was hoping that something creative could be done with that. Well, that is certainly the case.
I could add, that comment made me think, this site, the Tobacco Warehouse, was a studio project. Like almost every person that's gone through architecture school has either done or seen a studio of this site being done, and myself included. When I was a second year student, I actually did this project. So it was an incredible experience to know I was going to work on it. It was like, you're kidding me. I did this in my second year studio. And then, not just me, there are hundreds of architecture students, across this country that have used this as a site.
Well, that is a really wonderful story. How fantastic that you and Zach ended up working on your dream project. That's really wonderful. This is from Steve Amiega, and he thanks you for your presentation and comments. You're both a wonderful representation to the Marvel tradition. He also comments that moving the mechanical above the flood area was brilliant, and he can't wait to visit the building. So thank you, Steve. Now, this is from Edward Starr. Can a lower ceiling be placed in the theater section for artistic reasons?
Can a lower ceiling, was
Yes.
that the question? Yeah, I mean, and they have, they've built whole structures within that volume. They have the height and they have all of this floor space. So like the jungle show that I had one image of that was a whole structure that was kind of built with inside. So you're totally immersed in a new environment.
Yeah, I think
And-
the catwalk is great for rigging as well. So they're not, it's not only for supporting lighting and speakers, they're able to suspend things from it.
yeah, exactly.
Right, well, what was the design idea behind the stone benches in the Triangle Park?
You want to take that one, Zach?
Yeah, there was across from New Dock Street, and this is when it was being used as kind of a warehousing chain link fenced in area for DOT.
Mhm.
There was a lot, there's stacks and stacks of these bluestone pieces that were sitting there. And we were able to secure those to use within the site. So it was a nice way to salvage some good organic material that I think, you know, spoke really well to some of the other elements that MVVA was doing within the park, and reuse them in a nice way in the triangle. So I think a large part of the impetus for that was the designers coming in and just seeing that stacked stone sitting across the street and hopefully being able to use it.
Thank you. Now, this is from David Hogarty. He lives in the neighborhood, and he long has pondered how this ribbon of, forgive me, I'm going, clerestory brick supported the roof without any framing. And your wonderful presentation answers that question. It doesn't. And it's no less than marvelous for knowing. Thank you. William Higgins wonders, are all the floors polished concrete? Is it the original concrete?
It is not the original
no.
concrete, and I think part of that was being in the flood elevation and realizing that we needed a thicker concrete slab for uplift. And it's not actually polished concrete. We wanted it to be polished concrete at one point, but I think because of cost and durability, we worked very closely with York to talk about how we could finish it to have a highly kind of burnished finish that would be like polished but not polished. So we talked to them about the time spent and how much that you would use a mechanical float to you know, float it like you would a regular topping slab. And it was done a little bit more than that. And we had a wonderful site supervisor from York who really made sure that our intent was met with that. So it's actually just a topping slab poured on top of a structural slab, but it's finished in a way that we got a nice effect on it.
Well, having witnessed myself, I think it looks great. So absolutely. This will be our last question for tonight. Now, I'm not quite sure if I completely understand this, but hopefully you will. This is from Stephen Boracki. Is the exterior wall solid brick, no airspace? How many wides? Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Okay.
Zach, do you want to take that one too, Zach?
No, go for it.
Okay, it is a solid brick wall. There's no cavity inside of it. It's three wides thick, Zach,
5.
is that right?
It's 5.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, should know that. Embarrassed. 5. It's a very thick wall. You know, we touched on this a little bit in the presentation, but we had a lot of conversations like, do we cover it up and add insulation? And you know, very early on, we made the decision to try and really work with the mechanical systems and to not do that, because we really felt like being allowed to experience that from the inside was really the right thing to do, and really to respect those walls and be able to experience from the inside and the outside. So yes, it's a solid brick wall.
Right. Well, thank you so much for clarifying that. Before we conclude tonight, I just want, could you just say something a little bit more about you know, the upcoming project that you are going to be working on? And I'm thinking, of course, in particular, the National Black Theatre, the Northeast Bronx YMCA, and One Clinton that will house the New York Public Library. Would you mind just saying a few words about those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, National Black Theatre, we're very early days. We were just brought on board a couple of months ago. It's a really wonderful project that is being built at National Black Theatre is this historic institution in Harlem. and they're working with a developer to build a new mixed-use development that really the base of the building is going to be a new National Black Theater with a couple performance spaces, and then above will be a residential development. They have an existing building now that sits at that corner, and now really they want to build a theater that's going to last them for many, many years to come. So again, we're very early days in that, just really a couple months in. But the other projects that you mentioned, One Clinton, that is in downtown Brooklyn, would house the new Brooklyn Public Library. And that library is going to open this summer, and the building will be kind of fully complete in the fall of this year. So we're really looking forward to the opening of that library. And then finally, Northeast Bronx it's really an amazing project, one I'm very proud of. It's a new 50,000 square foot YMCA in the Eden Wall section of the Bronx. The YMCA has made a huge investment in this neighborhood and bringing them, really state-of-the-art building with a gym and a pool and wonderful community facility. And that it actually opened today as a vaccination site. We got the gym ready and got a certificate of occupancy in time to open that up for to the public for vaccinations, and then the entire building itself should really be ready to open in the summer or early fall.
Fantastic. Zach, do you want to add anything?
I think Lissa nailed it.
Okay, perfect. Well, then it now comes, I just want to express our gratitude for an absolutely fabulous presentation. It is such a fascinating project, and you both presented it so eloquently. And of course, your vast expertise, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it was so, it was so good to have a glimpse of how this project sort of began and concluded. And of course, it is a concluded project, and I do want to recommend that anyone who's here tonight who hasn't yet been to St. Anne's Warehouse will, when St. Anne's Warehouse has the opportunity to open up fully again, will have a chance to visit that. So really, thank you both so much. We are so grateful to you both. Victoria?
No, I have to really comment on the manner and your exchange between both of you. That's oft-used term. You have just a wonderful chemistry together. We don't do a lot of two-person presentations, and certainly not on Zoom. You're both so enjoyable to listen to. I could tell it's a great collaboration that comes through in this medium. So thank you. Really very special, and it leads to great accomplishments, I can tell. And just the other thing I want to say, it is so good to see you in your offices. Not only did you it was so great to see program space, but to see you both in your offices and people in the background. It's very encouraging to see that. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Listen.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us. As we said, we had such an enjoyable time putting together the presentation and kind of reliving this experience. So really, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Well, Lissa So, and Zachary Griffin, it has been our great pleasure, and we certainly look forward to the day that we can welcome you back to the General Society. Welcome you to the General Society. I just want to mention just a couple of things. First of all, I also want to thank the New York Landmarks Conservancy for their assistance in promoting tonight's Zoom seminar. And I do want to mention that we have upcoming Tuesday, April 20th, not too far away. We have multi-stories, 55 antique skyscrapers and the business tycoons who built them with Mark Hauser. On Tuesday, April 27th, we have material transfers, metaphor, craft, and place in contemporary architecture with Françoise Astor-Bolac. And on Tuesday, May the 4th, we have the Guide to Historic Artists' Homes and Studios with Valerie Spallent. Once again, I want to thank our really incredible speakers tonight. And I want to thank you, the audience, for attending and supporting our talks. And we look forward to seeing you in the future. So with that, I will say good night. So thank you so much again,
Thank
Lissa
you.
and Zach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
So
Good
much.
night.
See you all soon.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you.